My name is John William Arnold Sr., and I'm about to interview Lawrence Philip Elwell, a Korean War veteran. We're doing this at 108 Northwest J. Ellison, my home in Burleson, Texas. And this event is sponsored by the Burleson Heritage Foundation. This has been sponsored by the Burleson Heritage Foundation at Burleson, Texas. Mr. Elwell, when and where were you born?
I was born December 17, 1930, in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Good. And when did you enter the service?
Well, I joined the Marine Reserve in November of 1949. And then when the North Korean troops crossed the 38th parallel to invade South Korea, President Truman activated the Marine Reserves and I went over to Korea.
All right. You volunteered. You weren't drafted, right?
Oh, right. Well, the story is I was going to an adult education program, a Dale Carnegie course in public speaking and human relations.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 17 at the time I got in that class. And a lot of World War II veterans were in that class. One of them was Glenn Martin, a recruiting sergeant for the Marine Corps. And he became a friend of mine through this evening class. And after a year or two, he said, "Why don't you join the Marine Reserves?" And so in November of 1949, I would have been 18 at the time, I went out to the Marine Reserve Center and signed up. And then 8 months later, I find myself on active duty on my way to Korea.
All right. Then what happened?
Well, because I hadn't been to as much as a summer camp, I probably should have gone to boot camp. But it might have been better that I didn't go to boot camp because I weighed about 110 pounds. I was kind of a shrimp, but I didn't get to go to boot camp because the North Koreans were about to throw the American troops off the Pusan end of the peninsula. So we were needed in combat. So I did some training at Camp Pendleton, rifle range, hiking and so forth, and didn't get to Korea until November 4th, 1950. Now this was just about 3 weeks after the Incheon landing on the west coast, which was a brilliant strategic move by General MacArthur. And we then had the North Koreans on the run. We ran them out of South Korea. General MacArthur decided to unite the peninsula to push the North Korean communists back into Manchuria and have a free one nation, Korean nation. So I hit the beach in one of those amphibious assault vessels and hit the beach November the 4th, 1950 at Wonsan on the eastern coast of Korea, and nobody was there. I hit the beach with my rifle at port arms and found out that everybody had retreated. I was beginning to feel cheated. I thought, all this training, and I hadn't heard even anything except on a rifle range, so I was a Johnny-come-lately and beginning to feel like it was rather anticlimactic. But we pushed our way up north, and on Thanksgiving Day, November the 27th, we had turkey and dressing, and the word came from General MacArthur that we were going to be home by Christmas. And I thought, I haven't even, except for occasional sniper, I hadn't seen any action, and I felt like I was going to go home and like I'd missed the boat. But then the next day, the Chinese unleashed their assault, and the Chinese Communist troops attacked us. I was with Dog Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Regiment, 1st Marine Division, and the Chinese hit, we were out on the northwest point. They hit us first, and we had wave of those people coming in, and they would come in with bugles and noisemakers and shouting, "Tonight, Marine, you die." And they just kept coming after us that night. And I knew then that I wasn't going to go home without my baptism of fire.
Good, all right.
So it was exciting. However, we were so greatly outnumbered. We had 200 men in our company, Dog Company. And that night, the enemy kept coming on us with mortars and grenades and automatic weapons. Matter of fact, every 4th Chinese infantryman had a Thompson submachine gun, 45 calibers, and I looked on the butt plate of the machine guns as we wiped out these people attacking us, and looked at the dead Chinese machine guns, and it said U.S. Armory, Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I'm thinking, what is this? Some of our M1s were freezing up. The carbines weren't effective. But they're coming in there just with wild use of ammo, all from the United States. It was kind of discouraging.
Yes.
But we managed to hold our hill, and in the morning we took a roll call, and we were 16 able-bodied. All the rest were dead or wounded. And in addition to the assaults of the enemy, we had to deal with the cold weather. This was the coldest winter in North Korea in recent history, and it was dropping to 35 and sometimes 40 degrees below zero.
Wow.
So we had fellas just freezing to death.
Yes.
And so we held onto a hill for about 4 or 5 days, and then General Oliver Prince Smith, the commanding general of the 1st Marine Division, said, we're going to regroup at Hagaroo, south of where we were, and march out, fight our way out to the sea, to Hungnam, a big port there on the China Sea, the Sea of Japan. So we started fighting our way south, terribly outnumbered. I think they had about 8 divisions, Chinese Communists, to our 1 division, American Marines. And unfortunately, on the west side of Korea, the 8th Army had been hit so hard they were fleeing, and that made us get trapped. The Chinese simply surrounded us, and we were in what they call the Chosin Trap, the Chosin Reservoir. So when a reporter came to General Smith and said, do I understand that the Marines are retreating? He explained the difference between a retreat and an assault. He said, no, we're not retreating. Retreating is when the enemy's in front of you and you make your way back in a rout. He said, we are totally surrounded. We're assaulting the enemy, attacking the enemy in a different direction, which was factually true. And so we had 1 tank and 1 bulldozer, and the Chinese typical assaults would come at night, because that's not when we had any air support. And by the way, we had wonderful air support from Navy, Air Force, and Marine Air. And in the daytime, we'd simply call an airstrike, and they'd come in and with their machine guns in the wings and their rockets, and sometimes napalm, we would keep the enemy off of us. But at night, it was a different story. We had no air support, so they would attack really relentlessly. And I can remember we'd come across a roadblock at night, and our officers would say, we need a man up in the seat. So you'd use the bulldozer and push the roadblock out of the way, because there's only one way out, and that was on the road, if we're going to bring our dead and our wounded and our supplies out. And we don't retreat and leave our people out there with the enemy. So, man, we get up on the bench and put the bulldozer in forward and shove the trees and barbed wire and various debris in the roadblock, and then a sniper would get it. The officer would say, "Next man up." Crawl up there, push the dead Marine off, get that thing in gear, get shot, next man up. We cleared the roadblocks that way. We had one tank, and it was very useful with its cannon and its 50 caliber machine gun, but we were running out of fuel. And some of the fellows climbed up on the back of this tank because it was warm, the motor running and so forth, and they went to sleep. Nobody noticed, but the tank commander, in order to preserve fuel, cut the motor off. And these fellas froze to death. They just went from nice and warm to cold to they weren't even aware of it. We hauled their bodies off. Once we discovered it, said, boy, that was a loss. But we kept on pounding our way through. And when we got to Hagaroo, which was a heavily fortified place, the Navy Seabees and the engineers and the Marines had carved a landing field out of this rocky plateau, and planes were coming in with our ammo and some supplies, food, but we had to get to Hagaroo before we got totally cut off because we're out there with insufficient support. Well, there's one bridge just outside of Hagaroo, the safe place, and the word came that the Chinese were massing so many of their troops that we had to get into Hagaroo as fast as we could. So the word was, get across that bridge as fast as you can. I put my rifle up on this weapons carrier and tried to keep low and get across that bridge. Well, they had two Chinese communist machine gun emplacements up on the hill overlooking the bridge, and they kept crossfire right on that bridge, and all of us were just dropping. They were just nailing us. And I fell, and I thought I tripped. When I was a boy in Tulsa, sometimes the sidewalks would be uneven, and I would trip and fall, and my dad would say, well, you're really a hot one, aren't you? You're clumsy. Watch what you're doing. Watch where your feet are. And I thought, I think I've done what Dad said. I think I've just tripped over my own feet. But I got up quickly, machine guns going crazy, and I felt something. I said, I didn't just fall. I was shot. One of those 30 caliber machine gun rounds went through my right arm. I caught myself, and I guess that made it even worse. So now I'm trying to get off that bridge with the lame arm and bargaining with God, and thinking, Lord, I think I've lost my arm, but I don't mind losing an arm. I'd like very much to get off this bridge alive. And a lot of fellas didn't. It really had us in a bad position. I did get off the bridge and made it into Hagaroo, and when I got there, these big, I guess they were C-130s, I can't remember the name of the plane, but they would come in through these mountains and come right down in this little patch of ice that was called a landing field, and they're taking the wounded out. And broken bones went out. So the Navy corpsman looked at me and he said, you better get on that plane. So I dumped my bandoliers of ammo and my rifle and all my grenades and got on that plane. And that night, I got shot about 8 o'clock in the morning, and that night I was in a hospital in Kobe, Japan, sleeping between sheets. I couldn't believe it. I died and gone to heaven. But the funny thing was, there were so many casualties in that Chosin Reservoir battle that the Japanese were having to expand the hospital facility, add new wards. Well, in order to do that, they're using jackhammers, pneumatic drills, to break up the ground. And when I woke up, I heard that jackhammer, and I said, I'm back on that bridge, and that's a machine gun. And I sweat. I just thought, this has all been a dream. and it was just a jackhammer. And for years, if I were walking down the street and there's some kind of a street crew with a jackhammer, I'd break out in a sweat. And just kind of a reflex action, I guess. But I was grateful to be alive. A lot of my buddies didn't make it off that bridge or out of that Chosin Reservoir. By the way, we still had, I think, another 5 days to get to the sea. I didn't make it, but there were 7 of us from Dog Company that made it to the harbor to get on the ships, kind of like Dunkirk in France in 1940, I think it was. It was what they call an evacuation. Well, I heard later that the Marines were putting people on these ships, taking them out, and they looked at 7 fellas there and they said, you stragglers, get on that ship over there. And one of our buddies said, sir, we're not stragglers. We're a Dog Company, 2nd Battalion, 7th Regiment, 1st Marine Division. And the fellow was taken back. He said, I'm sorry, you're an entire infantry company? Yes, sir, 7. And he apologized and made sure that those 7 fellows, not stragglers, Dog Company, got on that ship with an escort. We really got hammered, but we held our position, we fought our way out, and we meet every year. Those of us who survived meet every fall and reminisce, and we're very close to each other.
Good. All right. When were you discharged? What date?
I came back.
And your rank?
Yes, I made corporal in the blanket. No merit. I didn't have any meritorious service. But anyway, you got, blanket promotions of corporal. I went to Pensacola, Florida to heal up from my wounds and got the Purple Heart awarded. But there were so many Purple Hearts, it's like giving away boxes of Cracker Jacks.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
all of us got wounded. And I was finally released from active duty back to reserve status in January of 1952. And then I stayed in and went back to college on the GI Bill. And gradually my wounds, especially my frostbite, rendered me eligible for disability. And then they wouldn't let me stay in the reserves, so they mustered me out.
And you got what degree eventually?
Well, I got
PhD.
the bachelor's degree in management and marketing on the GI Bill. Then I went back and got the master's degree in broadcasting and finally ended up with a PhD in communication studies and went into teaching. I became a professor of communication and taught for about 30 years.
And when did you meet your wife?
Oh, well,
Where
we
and
met.
when?
We met at a bowling alley. I was at that time selling. I was going to school, and I was selling cookware, and one of my customers said, you need to meet a woman I work with at Moorlane oil field supply, and she's on the bowling league, and come and see her. I said, well, I'm all right. No, I want you to meet her. So I went down to meet this girl named Nellie Capps at the bowling alley, and we struck up a friendship, and seemed like it wasn't very many years. We got married, and then the Lord blessed us with 4 sons, and passage of time, 12 grandchildren, and now we have 2 great-grandchildren.
That's great. And how long were you in the service, actually?
On active duty, only a year and a half.
Well, that's enough.
Well, I saw a lot of
I'd say
activity.
from what you did, yes. All right. That's a real good story.
Well,
And I know that everybody appreciates you serving the country and what you did.
well, the country's been very good to me.
Yes, me too.
I really am grateful to be an American and having sacrificed a little blood and bone over there. I'm not going back to look for it.
Okay, thank you very much.